I think maybe the common denominator is people are looking for growth in their career. For some, that is what's the next level, what's the next role, kind of the typical career path. And for actually a lot of people, I don't think that path is for me. I want to do something different.
Hello and welcome to the Pybites Podcast, where we talk about Python, career, and mindset. We're your hosts. I'm Julian Sequeira.
And I am Bob Beldebos. If you're looking to improve your Python, your career, and learn the mindset for success, this is the podcast for you. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Pybites Podcast, everyone. This is Julian. I'm here with a special guest today, Andrea Gosling. Now, Andrea is a friend of mine for many years now. We worked together at Amazon Web Services. And since we worked together, she's actually gone into a pretty cool career path for herself, helping people with their career paths and everything around that. And some of the insights today that she's going to share are really, really key to people who are thinking about making some career shifts or even stagnating in their jobs themselves. So I won't steal all the limelight now and ruin all the excitement. So Andrea, welcome to the Pybites Podcast. And I'm so glad you're here. Why don't you give a quick introduction to everyone who doesn't know who you are?
Well, thank you, Julian. Really happy to be here. So I'm based in Central Coast, New South Wales, and but originally from the U.S. You probably noticed the accent. Originally from Minnesota.
Yeah.
I always tell people that you hear a hint of Fargo. That's why. Comes out more times than other times. But been in Australia though for really the last 12 years, on and off since 1999. And have two kids and a gaggle of pets as well. And in terms of my career path, I've always kind of worked under the umbrella of HR. And so I've always kind of toggled between an HR generalist role where I'm directly supporting the business and a client group. And then I've gone into specialist roles as well, too, where I'm going deeper in an area of I've done building HR tech, looking at HR processes, global expansion, and that sort of thing. In 2022, I left the corporate world, took a bit of a sabbatical, and then embarked kind of on a new career path of doing career coaching, leadership executive coaching, and really enjoy helping coach and mentor folks in the space of what they want their career path to look like, and helping them navigate that.
That's awesome. I love it. And so actually, before I dive into that, I just want to clarify for everyone who's listening, when I say Andrea and I knew each other at Amazon, it's not because I was constantly in trouble with human resources and pulled up and talked to. So it's because we worked together. We worked together and stuff. So that's good. Yes.
Yes.
But look, so Andrea, with the people who listen to this podcast, yes, this is a tech podcast and we talk about Python and all of that. But part of what Bob and I do is we often talk about the mindset and the career thoughts and ideas and things like that go along with just any sort of role, let alone Python development, because we know that when you are coding, there is all these other things to it. It's never you just get to code without worrying about mindset and your career path and development. Now, the insights that you give, I think, are going to be universal to anyone, regardless of what position they're in, what kind of seniority in the role, what the type of role it is. So everyone listening, this is really important stuff that Andrea is going to be talking about. So make sure, take some notes, pay attention, hit rewind, do what you have to do, pull over the car. I'm joking, don't do that. But Andrea, I think a good way to start right now would be, what are the common pains? When people come to you, what is it that they're struggling with?
Mm-hmm. It can really happen. I think maybe the common denominator is people are looking for growth in their career. Maybe they feel a bit stagnant, or feel a bit stuck, and they want to find, figure out where they want to go next. For some, that is what's the next level, what's the next role, kind of the typical career path. Mm-hmm. And for actually a lot of people, I don't think that path is for me. I want to do something different. And so, figuring out what that might be, and then kind of walking through, and working through any, obstacles or barriers that come up as they kind of think about this new potential path for them.
That's cool. Is there anything that generally triggers that kind of a thought in people because it's a pretty big deal to get to a point where you think what I've invested in and what I've done to date, maybe that's not where I want to be for the rest of my life. So like, how do people come to that feeling? What happens?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And of course, I think it's highly personal. It can be different for everyone. I think if there were some commonalities, I think, typically a few things have shifted for them. So, what's important to them may have shifted. Different life priorities have come into play that have made them think differently about how they want to use their time and energy and where they want to invest that. Sometimes it's also a matter of, their idea of success. A lot of my clients are highly successful. They get, tremendous positive reviews. They make great money. And yet, they're just like, I don't know if I need to make more money. I don't know if I need to have a bigger team. I'm thinking, I kind of want to get out of my comfort zone a little bit. And so, yeah, maybe it's just kind of following their interests. Their interests are going down a different path as well.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because I feel the same, and you've made me reflect a bit on my journey and how the points where I kind of pivoted my career. There were a couple of things. I think the first big one was having kids. Right, suddenly going, oh wow, there's more to my life right now than working 20 hours a day and doing the crazy shifts and driving at night and all of that kind of stuff. And then I think the next one was growth, right? Feeling that sensation of, am I giving back? Am I able to give everything I possibly can in this role? Is it aligned with what I'm interested in? Is it detracting from my day? Do I wake up feeling miserable? These kinds of things. So that's really interesting. I like that. And I think a lot of people should ask those questions and they potentially don't. So if you're listening to this, start asking those questions, right? There's never a bad time to start considering these things. Are you happy? So moving on from that, when people do come to you and you identify these issues, what are some of the tips? What are some of the kinds of things that you tell them? How do you support them through this?
Well, look, I think a good coach doesn't tell people to do anything. I think, we really try to be in a place where we ask a lot of questions, help the coachee understand their, different perspectives, maybe, shine a light on some new insights. And I think, what I would usually try to do is, help understand, typically people have a little bit of an idea, right? They know they want to do something different. So maybe it's starting to explore what that different thing might look like. And so sometimes it's just kind of even going back and just doing a little bit of, food for thought, brainstorming, like you've been given $1 million to start a business. What does that business look like? Right.
Cool.
And, just getting them a chance to kind of play around with some exercises like that. Another thing is, once, maybe that next thing has been identified, is understanding, what it might be holding them back. In some cases, it's maybe just that kind of like, I'll call it societal pressure, right? We've only really have kind of been shown one pathway.
Yep.
This is the path you take. This is what career success looks like. And so, kind of working against that grain might feel a bit uncomfortable for people. Sometimes it's a bit of, pressure from others, feeling like, oh gosh, my parents, would think I'm crazy if I were to, leave this role, or, my manager thinks I should really be thinking about moving up versus taking this lateral move. And sometimes it's, our own pressure we put on ourselves, that fear of failing, or, the fear of this is a really risky move, or, gosh, I've already invested all this time and money on this career path and this degree. What now? Is this, should I really leave all that to try something new? So, I think there's a lot of things that can come up for people.
I like that last point you made, the sunk cost bias of going, look, I've invested my career, I've invested all this university degree, masters, years of experience into, say, finance, and now I hate it, but that's what I studied in, and that's what all of my network is in. That's what my connections, all my friends. I've built this entire life around this job. So the idea of changing to, say, become a Python developer or whatever else, right? That's scary as for anyone. I totally get it. Especially, as you say, some of the people, they've earned these pretty successful careers. They're making great money, and the idea of changing to something else, sometimes you might have to come in as a junior, which takes a pay cut, and there's all these pressures on you, right? And I guess if someone had that kind of pressure where they're sitting there going, look, I have built this career in this specific niche or this topic, whatever. I want to change to this. There's a huge confidence piece there. I have to have the courage to do that. How would you talk them through that? What are some things that you might ask them to consider to be able to make that choice? Whether it's right for them, first of all, but to at least get them to seriously consider it and really make sure that they know that if they stay, I'm happy with that. If I move, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times this comes down to like a bit of a risk analysis. And what I mean by that is, I think folks kind of want to have everything figured out. They want to know that their decision is solid. But the truth is, you can never really know, right? Until you try it, for these types of things. Maybe you can get close, right? You can interview people that are in the role, or have some coffee chats. Maybe you're lucky enough to do some sort of job shadow. But, until you're in that role and performing it every day, you won't know if that's really going to tick all your boxes. So I think, kind of the first step is to really, some of the things I'll do with my clients is we'll look at, okay, well, what are your deal breakers? What are the things that you absolutely must have in this role? Those are some things we can know, right? So there probably is some sort of minimum financial line there. Maybe not. You're a really good place if you don't have to worry about that. But, or, maybe it's about the hours or the travel or, what you want to make sure it allows you to do with your life outside of work. Maybe it is the actual, type of company. I want to work for a company that's in this space. So we kind of figure out what are those non-negotiables that we can know. The other piece is we'll usually look at like values, strengths, and interests. Again, try to, triangulate on those to kind of figure out what is a good alignment for what you want and what you're seeking. But like I mentioned, if I go back to that risk piece, I think the third piece is kind of let's really think about this risk in a way that maybe takes a bit of weight off of it. And so what that might look at like is, okay, that it might not work out. Then what? Oh, okay. Well, here's plan B. Okay, what are some other options if it does? Oh, here's plan C. Here's plan, D. And so I think when people can kind of get past that first question or that first fear, oh, it's not going to work. It might, I might fail. Okay, well then what? And then they'll realize there's a lot of other levers that they can pull that are available to them. I'm not saying any of this is easy, as you know, it's challenging, but I think it's about that mindset of going, it's not like I'm going to be wildly successful or I'm going to be like homeless, right? It could be, okay, this might not work. And then I can boomerang back to where I was. I can, look at this other option. I can do a couple other different things that are available to me.
I love that. It reminds me sometimes that we don't take our own advice, right? Especially those of us who are parents. We'll give this advice to our kids all the time. So just try it. Try this new sport. If you don't like it, you can quit. It's fine. yes, maybe a bit higher stakes, right? But that said, it's still there's this experimentation that you can do, right? That you have no one stopping you from experimenting and trying these new things, and if it doesn't work out, as I hate to bring up an old Amazon term, but a two-way door decision, right? If you
Yeah.
walk through the door and it doesn't work out, you just walk back out, go back to what you were doing before or something adjacent, and so on. So it doesn't have to be that big scary thing. And something that you've mentioned to me in previous conversations that we've had is that we're quite often taught or told or encouraged to think, what does the next 3, 5, 15 years look like, right? And
Mm-hmm.
but in this case, it's very much, well, just cut it down a little bit. What are the next
Mm-hmm.
steps, right? What are the next
Mm-hmm.
1 or 2 steps look like? So I really like that lowers the barrier of entry to make these changes and not be so
Mm-hmm.
afraid of it. So you mentioned before as well this aspect of permission, giving yourself permission to do it. What's something that someone can tell themselves to give themselves permission? Is there anything you tell people?
Yeah, well, usually what I'll ask them, what would it
Mm.
take for you to give yourself permission?
Okay.
And that will usually kind of surface, again, oh, maybe, I need to, maybe I need to understand this role better, or I need to know these aspects before I take this next step. Maybe I just need to apply and see what happens, right? A lot of times people are stopping themselves before they even apply for the role. They've already kind
Mhm.
of written it off and going, nope, I won't get it. Nope, it's not worth it. Nope, apply, have a conversation. You can always say no.
Mm.
And so, maybe it's, yeah, just apply for a few roles. I don't have to take anything. I'll just apply.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think it's a good question for people to pose for themselves. What would I need to give myself permission to do this? And then, to your point, what would be the smallest step you could take to kind of move down that path, to start to
Hmm.
explore, to start to experiment? And I know something else we talked about before is I do think there is sometimes this, illusion of a perfect job or,
Mm.
the ideal career path. And, the fact of the matter is, I think it's very rare that, someone's going to find that one job when they're 22, that is, perfect for them.
Yep.
That's going to lead them all the way through, 60, 65, maybe, more, who knows these days, for the next 45 years, that they're going to be perfectly happy. And I think that sounds actually more, that sounds, more unlikely than actually being in a spot where you're going to, be on the zigzaggy career path and experimenting and trying new things. And, I think, I guess one of the, to use another Amazonianism, one of the thought experiments I like to have people think about in terms of giving themselves permission is it's what Jeff Bezos used when he thought about leaving his, really good job on Wall Street at an investment firm and starting this
Hmm.
risky internet business. And that's what he called the regret minimization framework. And so for him, he went
Hmm.
through this thought exercise of, okay, well, when I'm 80, if I decide to not go into this business, am I going to regret that more than having going into it and fail? And for
Mm.
him, it would just be heartbreaking not to try it. And he'd rather try it and fail than not try it at all.
Yep.
And so I think that's another kind of good mental exercise to take yourself through if you're, to say, okay, am I willing to try this and fail? And or if I just never tried at all, what's going to feel better for me? What am I going to regret
Yeah.
less?
I love that form of thinking. I find very simplistic and powerful, and so easy for people to do, right? I mean, I remember we
Mm,
used to do that with the hours that you commit to the day job. Are you going to regret
mm-hmm,
that you spent your prime, let's say 30 to 40, that you spent that decade working overnight, working extra hours for a giant corporation? We won't get into those politics, but did you feel good about it? And would you regret that on your deathbed? Or would you say, I'm so glad I gave an extra 20 hours a week to that company when I was in my prime? That's, if that's how you feel, fantastic. If it's not how you'd feel, then maybe it's time for a change, And so I think it's incredible the kinds of things you help people do, because it might sometimes seem like, okay, I spent a month or two with people like this, but those changes that you help people make are life changing. They, reverberate down the timeline for the next 10, 20
Mm.
years, it's super cool. I really love that. And just I want to, because you mentioned it, that kind of illusion of the perfect job. As you said, your values, your wants, your needs, they change over the years. So what was your perfect job at 22? Being like a field engineer driving around Sydney repairing machines, heaven on earth. I loved it, when, or whatever age I was when I did that. But very quickly that stopped being the perfect job because I had two kids and I had other priorities and things I wanted to do in life that didn't involve keeping me awake till 4 a.m. in a data center by myself somewhere. So it is,
Yeah.
but often, as you've said, often people don't consider this stuff until maybe it's too late. Not too late, but they're feeling the pain and they're really stressed and they're really
Yeah.
worried. So do you have any examples, and even your own, right? Because you also made this plunge too. You were in an incredible position when we worked together. You're incredibly senior. I used to have a lot of respect for you, not now. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But I remember you were quite senior when we worked together, and so you went from that, and you kind of made that big jump that people would be afraid to do. So, do you have any experiences or personal anecdotes there you want to share?
Yeah. Well, I'll share, like, I have a couple. I'll share, a little bit of my own, but also share, some examples of, where I've been able to help people. But yeah, in my own career path, as I've looked back, I would say, it was some of those what appeared to be risky decisions that are the ones that I'm probably the most grateful for, So pausing uni to come to Australia for the first time. Like, a lot of people would probably be discouraged to do that. Like, you just have 1 year left, finish it. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to go
I'm done.
backpack and, work in Australia for a year. See you guys. And I'm so glad I did that. Like, I learned so much from that experience. And then I think, I really kind of went into the mindset upon graduating with my master's was like, just really take the best opportunities over the next, 5, 10 years, regardless of the location, regardless of, you know, what it might look like, just make sure it's a really interesting role and that you're growing and learning. And so that was kind of my next focus in my career. But yeah, like there's been times where, I was tapped on the shoulder and encouraged to, put my name into the hat for bigger roles. And I, I kind of resisted and I said, no, actually, I think I'd rather be in this space. I went from leadership roles back into IC roles, like I said, into, regional roles, into smaller roles. And I think, all along, I just had to kind of assess, what are kind of the pillars I'm anchoring to? How is this meeting my needs right now, both on a professional and on a personal level? In terms of clients, and people that I've worked with, I've had examples where, again, someone's, highly successful in their role, working for, a couple of the big, the FANG companies.
Yep.
And then, decides that, they want to try something different. And, but there's this like, ooh, okay, this is a smaller company. A lot of people probably even haven't heard of this name before. Do I want to make this leap? Right. And
Yep.
yet, they could see, okay, this is what's important to me right now. I can have a bigger impact in this role. I can, it's a smaller company, but I have a bigger blast radius. I think I could do some big, important work here. I have more exposure to the C-suite. Those were important for that client. And so that was a really successful leap that they made. I had another client who they were thinking about changing functions. They were looking at changing functions and they decided, they had the job offer pretty much in the bag, but there was still this like question of like, can I be successful over there? Am I
Yeah.
making the right decision? And so helping them, making sure that it aligned to their values and what they wanted next. And, really happy to report that, they were very pleased with that move.
Oh, cool.
I still like giggle at the email. They're like 10 out of 10, highly recommend. They were really pleased. And yeah, look, I actually just had a client today, email me and say, "Yep, I'm doing it. Made
Nice.
the meeting with my boss. I'm going to start my own consultancy." And so, taking
That's
that leap
awesome.
and starting up their own business. So, look, I think the takeaway is there's so much opportunity for us, but we're kind of our biggest limiter. We're the one that's putting that throttle, holding the throttle back.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just think there's so many examples of people taking that leap, loving it, going, why didn't I do this sooner? And so, I think if people find themselves feeling stuck, feeling like they're hesitating to take a leap, it's a good time to explore this.
Yep. Oh, those are awesome, awesome stories. I love hearing that. Happy endings is really, really cool.
Yes,
And I
yeah.
think, one thing you mentioned before is people's judgment, right? And the worries about what are your
Mm,
parents going to think? What are your family going to think? Friends, co-workers, ex-colleagues, what's your LinkedIn network going to think when you make
mm,
these plunges? But speaking from experience here, is that if you have conviction for what you want to do and what you want out of the next step, which I assume you kind of wouldn't make that step unless you were fully passionate about it. If you're like, that's it, I'm going to go here because I'm going to make a difference here. It meets my values, A, B, C, D. There's going to be incredible. When you have that excitement and energy for it, everyone comes along with you. And so coming over to Pybites full time after last year's redundancy, it was nice that I didn't get to make the choice myself in the sense that the company
mm,
made it for me. But I could have gone and looked for another job, and I had people trying to, tell me, come and apply for this job. What do you think about this? Would you consider doing this? And having that conviction that working full time on Pybites on my own thing is what's best for me. It's what's best for the family. It's best for my mental health. It's best for my values and what I can do and give back. I can execute quickly on my ideas. I don't have to, write 10 documents every, 6 months or something to do it. But it that was something that really made me passionate about doing it. And so all of these people just rallied around me and going, here's how I can help you. Reach out if you need anything. And everyone really had my back. And even the family was behind me. It didn't seem like
mhm.
such a bizarre, crazy thing that I was doing decision, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point is a lot of times the story that we're telling ourselves about other people's reaction is actually
Mm,
probably really different in reality, right?
yeah.
And so, to your point, like, yeah, that network that you have is probably, even though it seems like you're going down a narrower path or a different path, but your network's probably getting wider, right? People love to
Mm,
see this. They want to be on that journey with you.
yep.
And I think what you're doing is great, because I think that's also a way people can experiment and see if something different. If they want to move from a non-tech to a tech field, okay, well, why don't you do some training, some coaching, and build up that skill set? That could be another way to experiment that can help you test if that's the right ground for you before taking a leap.
That was a fantastic sales pitch. Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, well, if you need some Python coaching, I know two guys who do run a company that does
Could
that. So
help you
no,
out.
no, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. But no, it really is exciting. And I know the world is a kind of scary place at the moment for some, but I just encourage people right now, don't let the dramatization of the media that we're used to seeing that makes everything seem so doom and gloom, because we know that's what sells newspapers and ad spots and everything. But there's still so much opportunity out there. There's still so much to do. There's so much to learn. There's so many different technologies across all different types of, whatever your career is, finance, HR, whatever. There's so many things to learn and grow into that it really is. It doesn't matter when you do it. It's going to be exciting if you really have that passion for it. So Andrew, if there was, as we get to the end of this, if there was some sort of parting tip or wisdom that you'd like to impart on people right now as they're listening, I imagine they're sitting there on the edge of their seat going, Andrew, tell us more. What would you say to people?
I would say, I think a lot of people see that stuck feeling as a negative thing. And I would actually say, like, think of that as a positive thing. It's telling you you're ready for something next. You're ready for the next chapter for your career, your life, whatever that might be. And so don't stay in it too long, but use it as your nudge to start exploring.
I love that. That's just like what we would look at in corporate jobs, right? You have to kind of see the red in the metrics to know that there's something to improve or there's something to grow, there's something to change. So if you're seeing the red in your personal career metrics of what you want out of a career, maybe it's time to make that change. So I love that. You listen to yourself, listen to those things that are happening, listen to what your body's telling you as well. So I think that's fantastic. So with that said, Andrea, where can people find you? I imagine there are people, let's send people to you for this kind of advice. Where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is always good. So Andrea Gosling at LinkedIn. And then my website is careerlinkcoach.com. So either of those two places.
Awesome. We'll link those in the show notes or the YouTube comments, description, whatever it's called. And so people can come find you and ping you and ask you for some support. I think that'd be great. So my asthma's flaring up. I'm trying to hold back some coughing right now. This autumn here, everyone, it's hit autumn in Australia. It's suddenly gotten a bit cold and my asthma's kicked up. So I'm trying not to cough into the microphone. But Andrew as well, we always end with reading. So are you reading any books at the moment? What do you like to read and what are you currently diving into?
Yeah, well, no surprise. I'm a bit of a self-improvement junkie right now. Comes in handy. But the one book I'm reading now, and I think it kind of plays in well with this, is the book Let Them by Mel Robbins. And if for folks not familiar with this, it's a lot about how do you kind of work past what you perceive to be other people's perceptions. And so, if we use the example before, people might think I'm crazy for, leaving this job. They might think it's too risky. Okay, let them think that. Let me analyze the risk for myself and know that I'm mitigating it with X, Y, Z, and that I'm okay to make this decision. And so I think it's a helpful one for people that kind of find themselves getting stuck because they're worried about, the perception of others.
Love that. That's really cool. I might have to pick that up. I think that's a great book to read. And it's the most common thing, right? Of what other people are going to think. We worry about that across everything we do, not even just the career thing. So I really like that mentality. It's just that same thing of just focus on what you can control in the situation, right? You can't control what other people think. So I think that's cool. So definitely give that a look if you haven't read it, everyone. And from my perspective, I'm not reading anything new. If you look up my profile on Pybites Books, which you have to check out, by the way, I'll send you a link. If you look up our book tracker, I've probably got 20 or 30 books that I'm currently reading because I pick them up. I'm like a shotgun reader. I'll read a chapter here, then put it down for a couple of weeks, read another book. So nothing new since the last Pybites podcast episode. But yeah, Andrew, well, look, thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun, long overdue for us to connect and get something like this going. But it's super impressive what you've done. I'm glad that we've kept in touch and found out that we live pretty close to each other as well. So we're going to have to go catch up for a couple of beers or something soon. But yeah, and for everyone listening, it is currently school holidays in New South Wales in Australia. So both Andrea and I have our relative children to take care of. Might two of them have snuck in during this recording,
Have
Andrea,
they?
and I've gone, put the arm out and just waved them away. But yeah, we've better go make sure the houses haven't burnt down. So thank you for joining us, Andrea. Any last words you want to say before we leave?
No. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to connect, and really appreciate it.
Awesome. Pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing all of these wonderful tips, these insights, the wisdom. It's lovely to have you here, and hopefully you won't be a stranger. We'll catch up soon.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will catch up in the next episode. Check out all the links, subscribe, and make sure you just go and get some coaching from us if you want to become a Python developer. That's what we do. All right. Thanks, Andrea. See ya. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Pybites Podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. A quick message from me and Bob before you go. To get the most out of your experience with Pybites, including learning more Python, engaging with other developers, learning about our guests, discussing these podcast episodes, and much, much more, please join our community at pybites.circle.so. The link is on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube, and it's in the show notes for everyone else. When you join, make sure you introduce yourself, engage with myself and Bob, and the many other developers in the community. It's one of the greatest things you can do to expand your knowledge and reach and network as a Python developer. We'll see you in the next episode, and we will see you in the community.